You are listening to the Cattle Call podcast. This is the place where computer-aided design and drafting meets humor and practicality, with a touch of business acumen thrown in for fun. Jim and Rocco, the owners of Zentech Consultants, the premier U.S. technology consulting firm for architecture, engineering, construction, and manufacturing, discuss the fascinating world of CAD with some humor and some honesty. The Cattle Call podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cattle Call podcast with Jim and Rocco from Zentech Consultants. I am Jim, your resident CAD geek host, and with me, as always, is my partner in crime,
Rocco.
Just simple Rocco. He's not a geek of any kind. But
you're still sounding a little froggish today.
I am a little froggish. I'm still a little froggish and under the weather, but I'm getting better. So
sound very manly.
Very manly and deep. I like it. It's the first time in my life anybody's ever told me I'm manly, so I'll take it. So, all right. So today we have a very special guest on the show. We have John Abe, who is a solutions consultant with Bricsys. He's here to talk to us about the practical use of point clouds. So, John, thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent. Yeah, you say that now. Wait till you get to the end of the podcast and you never want to talk to us again.
I'm sure I'll still be glad to be here.
All right, that's good. All right, so at least one of you guys will be. Rocco never is, so it's all good. So, all right, so before we get into our point cloud discussion for today, let's learn a little bit about John and what he does. So, John, what's your background and what exactly are you doing as a solution consultant for Bricsys?
Sure. So my background is architecture. I'm a registered architect in Georgia. Worked in the Atlanta market for 35 years. And during that time, I did a lot of different types of commercial architecture, ranging from office and education to residential, campus, and multi-use and hospitality, and worked for some notable firms in Atlanta, including a global design firm. During that tenure, I learned CAD very early on in my career, starting with Intergraph IGDS, which is interesting because I'll make a parallel to that a little bit later. But so during my career, I've learned a lot of different CAD and BIM applications and eventually leveraged that and became an IT and a CAD manager, and ended up at a global firm as an IT and CAD manager for 11 years and ultimately became their BIM manager. And there I learned to use the product, support it, and train people on it and implemented it. After that, I moved on to the Autodesk reseller network, where I again was working with the Autodesk products, but primarily Revit, and worked there for another 12 years. And now I'm with Bricsys as a solution consultant. So what that means is I'm basically taking my industry experience and working with customers who are either thinking about purchasing the product or have already purchased it and are implementing it, and help them with implementing it and answering their questions. And evangelizing the product when I get a chance, both through webinars and podcasts and other marketing events.
Nice. It's always good to have an evangelist on the call. It's always a good thing. So, all right. So, folks, we have all heard about point clouds, right, for a lot of years now, and there are always, there are people out there who use them on the daily basis, use them all the time. But I still run across a lot of people who are shaky on the overall concept of point clouds, right? They know that a point cloud, it's some type of a 3D scanning process that gives them all kinds of data that most of them have no clue as to how they would use it. And they're not really sure how it can help them in their daily work. And I also know, a lot of folks who think of point clouds as something that's, only useful for scanning, existing buildings and things like that. But in reality, it's a really versatile data collection method that I think can benefit everybody, right? From manufacturing mold makers to construction crew chiefs and survey crew chiefs and everybody in between. So that's what we kind of want to focus on and talk to John about today. So John, can you give our listeners a simple explanation of what point clouds really are and how they work?
Well, I'll do my best. And
we have faith in you.
See, I think point clouds for a long time have been, and you'll have to pardon the pun, a bit nebulous to the average designer or architect or engineer. Basically, point clouds are a digital representation of an existing object or building or site or any combination of that. And the points are captured by 3D laser scanning equipment that detects the surfaces of these objects, creating an implied surface. So the more points, the more accurate the representation. But it's not a physical surface or solid geometry. It's just a collection of points that looks like the surfaces. Photographic imagery can then be captured at the same time, and that is either combined with the point cloud, so it's easier to visualize, but it can also transfer some of that color imagery onto the points themselves. So when you get a dense collection of points, you actually see what the actual object that was scanned looks like, not just the form of it, if you will.
Yeah. So, okay, it's a good explanation. I think that kind of brings it down to something that most of us can understand, except maybe Rocco, but Rocco doesn't understand much, so we don't bother him too much. We leave you sleep over there in the corner. You're welcome. So, one thing I think that's consistent about point clouds, right? No matter how you're using them, is, like John was saying, they're developed from a scanning device, right? And each scanner has various levels of accuracy, right? Depending on what your scanning needs are. And, there are different methods of scanning that, often come up in these conversations, right? So you hear terms like, LiDAR and photogrammetry and laser scanning, all of which have similarities, right? But work best for different kind of work and construction type processes. But, luckily, that's why John is here. He's going to help us understand what all of those strange terms actually mean. So, John, how are point clouds actually created, right? Kind of going beyond your beginner's answer there a few minutes ago. And what types of scanning do you find work best for different types of work?
Yeah, so there's kind of a class, if you will, of scanners. There's 3D laser scanners. There's LiDAR scanners, which are just really a type of 3D laser scanner. There's also handheld scanners, and they use various technologies. And there's even LiDAR scanners in iPhones and iPads, the Pro models, both for the 12 and 13. But the 3D laser scanners can be handheld. They can usually tripod mounted, meaning you put them on a tripod, you kind of set them off, and they collect the points. You move them to another part of the building or the site and do it again, and you try and get an overlap or different points of view. Because this thing is stationary, it's only going to capture things that it can see in its line of sight. Now that's a 360-degree line of sight, but still it's straight lines from that fixed position. So a lot of scans, if it's a big project, often are made up of multiple scan positions. LiDAR scanners, LiDAR stands for light detection and ranging, and it's usually associated with high resolution maps and applications in surveying and archaeology and geology and things like that. And in my research, much of the US is actually publicly available in LiDAR scans. Not all of it, but a lot of it is, which is really interesting. And as I said, in one of my past lives, we were looking into scanners, some commodity scanners, some of the first, if you will, scanners that were a low enough price point that a smaller shop might be able to afford. And it was set up with a small tablet, some custom software, and an Xbox Connect sensor head. So that sensor head was part of a gaming system, and somebody said, hey, it's detecting movement basically using a LiDAR type of scan head, and they created it for one of the first solutions I know of a handheld scanning solution. And now, like I said, the iPhone and the iPad even have LiDAR scan heads in them. So it's becoming more accessible, and the software is becoming easier to use. So I think we're going to see a lot more people gravitating towards it for their needs.
Nice. Yeah, I actually didn't know that they had those in the newer iPhones. Learn something new every day. That's awesome. That's cool. So
I actually was required to get an iPad for work because we've been playing around with it, and we're going to actually, do a webinar soon, early next year, that's going to kind of focus on the iPad scan head and how we can scan something and bring it into Bricsys and what you can do with it.
That's very cool. I like that. make sure you send me the info on that webinar. I want to see that. So,
We will.
all right. So Rocco, so from our standpoint at Santec, right? Do you see a lot of our clients who are actively working with, or at the very least, who are interested in using point clouds for their regular work? And what kind of segment of that AEC world do you see having the most interest at the moment?
I don't hear a lot of people asking about it. I think that it's, it's an area that a lot of folks have interest in, right? And that's why we thought to do this podcast today. But I don't hear a lot of people doing much in that area. And those who are, I think that it's mostly, I hear more people in the civil area than
Yeah.
anywhere else.
Yeah, that's kind of what I see too. Is that it's been for a while now that the survey and the civil guys using that lidar stuff and really getting the high end $150,000 scanners. So they're the folks who use it are really dedicated to it and put in a lot of investment and time in developing it. But I think that more and more people are becoming aware of it and really coming to the fore on this. I think point clouds and scanning data, right? It sounds like really complex things to work with on a daily basis, and then they kind of are. But I think that the actual processes for developing those scans has gotten infinitely simpler in just the last few years than they were in the early years of this tech, right? Like John was saying when it first came out. And I think that these processes they're becoming almost standard practice for a lot of the construction world now. And I see a whole host of new products and services coming online to kind of address that growing need, right? Bricsys is obviously one, but there are plenty of others from hardware services to scanning services, post processing and plan development, deviation testing, that all tie into this. And I think the key is to understand exactly where point clouds can fit into your particular work process. You should understand where they're applicable for what you do and when they're not. Right. So John, where and why should people be looking at using point clouds? Right. What are the big areas they're most commonly used in the design build world?
I'd like to just kind of answer the question and follow up with a couple of case studies that I'm familiar with. But really, you can use point clouds really anywhere that requires an accurate recording of existing objects or the built environment. And what I mean by that is buildings, utilities, could be statues or monuments, topography, so the landscape, houses, retail, really anything kind of, there's an opportunity for it, but it's really looking for something that's already there to scan, right? You don't scan unless you've got something that's already there.
Yeah,
So
they're
it's
point
all
clouds,
about,
but we're not actually scanning clouds. So that's probably
that's right.
There you go.
We're creating them. So, as built survey, reality capture, we hear those terms a lot. And really that's relating to existing condition survey. I've seen it early on, probably 10 to 15 years ago, in historic preservation, because depending on the level of detail, it's very difficult sometimes to recreate some of the details in older buildings that we're trying to renovate that are, say, on the historic register. Mm-hmm. Well, 3D laser scans can scan a part of the building that is still existing. And from that, we can model, and you talked about making forms. Well, that same geometry that we created from the point cloud can be very accurate, and we can create a mold to recreate or recast components of a building. So it's great for that type of renovation work. It's great, as you said, for construction verification and sequencing. I've seen that a lot. A lot of contractors pick up on technology for, they use the survey equipment, right, for using points to actually locate stuff on the site, but they'll also use points to confirm that they built things accurately on the site. 3D laser scanning just ups the game and gives them more data that they can use for things like you said, like deviation analysis to see if the slab is flat, the quality of the construction is good, not just that it's accurately built in the right place. And it can also supplement some of the design data as you're building stuff to do clash detection. So the the uses are kind of limitless, but it does deal with taking maybe something that has been designed but is starting to be built, or something that's already built that you need to renovate or add on to or make some change to it.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. Thanks. So, look, I think that, listeners out there, right, you guys can begin to kind of understand the importance of this technology, right? Even if you're not already working in it. And I think the benefits of seeing, existing conditions accurately and identifying the flaws and the variations, like John was saying, from, the difference between the plan to the construction process, right? Access planning for tight areas and sites. There are just dozens and dozens of vital applications for this type of technology. It's amazing, right? So I tell you what, let's take a quick break here to catch a word from today's sponsor. And when we get back, I want to talk to John about how Bricsys and their parent company, Hexagon, are working to put point cloud capacity into everybody's hands. So stand by, folks. We'll be back in just a minute with more of the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, Rocco. So we are sponsoring ourselves yet again today. What is it we want to talk about?
We're going to talk about me today, Jim.
No one wants to talk about you. Not even you.
Oh, fine. Let's talk about Zentek Tech Blocks.
Awesome. I like Zentek Tech Blocks. Zentek Tech Blocks are prepaid support hours that let you call on Zentek's experienced technical staff to address all your support questions, problems, help you with workflows and standards, really anything you need on the technology side. We're here to provide the support you need so that your most talented people aren't being dragged into helping everybody else in your company instead of working on the billable jobs that you need them focused on. All right. So Zentek Tech Blocks are available in multiple sizes. We sell them in 5-hour, 10-hour, 20-hour, and 40-hour prepaid support blocks. And if you're interested and you need that sort of help, Rocco, how do they reach out to us?
Yeah, hit up our website, zentechconsultants.net. Give us a ring, 866-824-4459, or even drop us an email, sales@zentechconsultants.net.
All right, Zentek Tech Blocks, the vital support that your people need exactly at the moment that they need it. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Cattle Call Podcast, where we're talking about point clouds today with John Ade from Bricsys. And in the first half of the show, we focused on defining point clouds, right, and what their uses were. And in this half, I want to get more into the individual uses for point clouds, right? Who benefits the most from them, and how Bricsys is actually bringing a lot of these tools to the masses. So John, let's start with the who side, right? Who are the people in the AEC community who you think see the most benefit from using point cloud scans?
So I think this is kind of a one of those things that's not so transparent, but ultimately I think the owner benefits the most, because having accurate as-built information empowers the designers, engineers, contractors, subcontractors, anybody working on the project to do their work and do it more accurately. So for example, to manually capture existing conditions takes time and is prone to error in measuring and capturing unique conditions, whereas 3D laser scanning is thorough and captures everything in its line of sight. But really, anyone who needs accurate digital representation of existing conditions will benefit from this. And I think that the technology is, the price keeps coming down and the features keep increasing, that it's really becoming accessible to just about anybody. So there's different levels of scanners. You don't have to go all in with tens of thousands of dollars of equipment. You can go in with maybe $10,000 worth of equipment, let's say. I'm just throwing numbers out there.
Yeah, and that's right. I think your point is a real good one too, in terms of the owners and them seeing the benefit. And the thing everybody I think should keep in mind, even if you're not the owner listening to the podcast here, if you're the GC or the surveyor or the architect, I think it gives you a great value add when you're the person providing that information to them. In a lot of cases, you can maintain an ongoing relationship with the owner for long-term support and renovation of those facilities when you're hosting that data for him, when you're the one who created it and you're hosting it, and you can model parts of it for him as they need it for new jobs. It almost guarantees you return work. So I think that's a really good point. All right, so Bricsys. Bricsys had the ability to import and work with point cloud data for a while now. The system is pretty open. in terms of what types of scans it can take in. And it has a really nice array of tools to work with and to clip the point cloud data, down to workable areas inside your Bricscad drawing files. It even has the capacity to tie the point cloud to specific coordinate systems, right? Which in my own little personal civil survey world that I live in is really, really important. So John, can you kind of tell our listeners what's the process, I guess, of working with point clouds in Bricscad?
So I'll kind of start a little bit high level and just saying that, a lot of there are a lot of solutions out there that accommodate point clouds as kind of a secondary consideration, meaning they may have a plugin or they may be able to consume it after it's been processed in another application. And more often than not, that pre-processing takes time and effort, and because that solution is not purpose-built to handle point clouds, it tends to be kind of slow and clunky to work with it. Bricscad pre-processes point clouds on the fly the first time it is inserted. So pre-processing is part of the process of inserting it into a design file. And typically it will reduce the size of the point cloud while it's doing that. And for example, recently I worked with a point cloud which was the structural frame of a commercial office building. It was a concrete frame, had several scan stations, and the multiple scans totaled approximately 97 gigabytes worth of data. It took Bricscad approximately 30 minutes to process the point cloud the first time, and that may seem like a long time, but it ended up reducing the total amount of cached point cloud information to 34 gigabytes. So it dropped it by almost 2/3. And then once it's inserted that first time or processed that first time, it literally takes seconds for it to be inserted into another design file. So if it needs to be used in another file for other purposes, it can be attached time and time again, and it doesn't need to process again. So the advantage is that Bricscad leverages more of the computer resources when it's doing that processing and handling that large amount of data. I know a lot of older software that I've used would not take advantage of multiple cores and multi-threading. Bricscad does. It's newer software, newer meaning it's 20 years old, but it's been using newer code and really keeping an eye on really leveraging advancements in coding as well as in the hardware that it runs on. So,
and it's substantial, right? I mean, try doing a file that size with recap and some of your competitors' packages. I've done that, and you can just walk away and come back next week if your system doesn't just crash right then and there. So yeah, it's a definite plus. So Rocco, I know we said before that, right? We don't see a huge amount of folks gravitating specifically towards point clouds, but in terms of our current Bricscad clients, right? What kind of level of interest or discussion do you have with them in terms of learning about the built-in point cloud processes that come right out of the box with Bricscad?
Yeah, there's definitely folks that are Bricscad users that are asking more and more about it, and I think that with this new release, and John's going to get into it in a little bit more depth, right? But there's a lot of additional functionality, so it's going to create more and more awareness. So particularly customers who are on maintenance with Bricscad, they'll get those benefits with the V22 release. So definitely interest, and for those of you who don't know much about Bricscad, definitely reach out to us. A very affordable, stable DWG based CAD platform, available as either an annual or perpetual license, and definitely seeing a lot of folks come to us with interest in Bricscad as a whole.
And I think it's important, right? I think part of it comes down to the fact that it is a CAD system, and I think that there is kind of a perception out there that working with point cloud really requires a dedicated point cloud software, right? That a CAD system can't effectively work with the data. And I think, that people want this information in their drawings, but that they either don't know or don't understand the ways that you can, use a tool like Bricscad to actually handle, 3D modeling or even do a scan to BIM process, at real high speeds with the way that they use the multi-threading and so on to get it in there to really help automate the generation of your existing conditions, right? From point to solid models and so on, so that you can create your design. So, John, why should people use Bricsys for this, right? What tools and features do you think that you guys handle better in this point cloud arena than your competitors do?
Well, Bricsys, like I said before, internally processes the point clouds. That's a huge advantage. You don't need something else to do that. You're basically using Bricsys to bring it in and then be able to use it anywhere you need to. And it handles very large point clouds or, collections of point clouds. So it has the ability to process an individual point cloud or a folder full of point clouds that are, say, different scan locations of a particular project. New in V22, we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. There's a deviation analysis tool, which is really great, meaning that if you're doing point cloud scans during construction and you have a model that came out of Bricsys, let's say BIM, or some other package, it's 3D model, you can overlay the two and run an analysis to see how closely the construction is marrying up to real life. So that's great for as-built scans during construction. And Bricsys BIM, so we have the different levels of Bricsys. They're all built on DWG. So Bricsys BIM has some additional tools to help automate modeling from the point cloud. So it will recognize points that define a surface and will allow you to automatically model surfaces and solid geometry between surfaces representing floors and roofs and walls inside of Bricsys using the point cloud natively. And then we also support bubble views. So for those who aren't that familiar with point clouds, if you have a large point cloud that has multiple scan positions, it will have what's called a bubble view. So it's where you can open up that specific view or that specific scan location and look around in a panoramic 360-degree view, and you can actually work through that view. So you're working on a limited part of the point cloud through the bubble view, which can make your work go even faster.
Which is amazing. Yeah, I've seen it. It's really cool. So yeah, I think one of the last big sticking points, right, that I run across with folks is, and John's hit on this a couple of times now, it's this fear of, immense file sizes, when they're working with a point cloud. They don't want their drawing files growing to like 100 times their original size because they imported a billion points, right? There's fear. I think that their CAD systems can't handle that type of load, and that they need to go out and invest in these, Uber computers before they could even consider working with these kind of tools. And that's really not the case when you're working with Bricsys. I mean, like John was saying earlier, it has some really amazing tools to help you work with only the point data that you need and to strip out any unnecessary information and dramatically reduce overall file size. So, John, how are you guys doing that, right? What are the way that Bricsys is helping you keep those file sizes down? How does it compare in terms of, I know you gave a little example earlier, but in terms of, comparing Bricsys files with point clouds in them versus, your competitors' files?
Well, I think the biggest point is that, we can handle big point clouds. I gave you an example of a 97 gigabyte point cloud, which I know will cripple some other solutions, and I don't want to name names,
Yep.
But I also know of a coworker that processed the largest point cloud, that single point cloud or collection of point clouds that he's processed was close to 500 gigabytes. It was like 490 something gigabytes. And he said it took 40 minutes to process. And then once it did reduce it down to maybe, a third or half the size, but once it was in Bricsys, he could move around in it. And so Bricsys has a unique way of handling that. When it first comes in, it limits how many points it's displaying. So that's another way that it automatically gets your performance a little bit faster, but it doesn't limit you to that. So you can increase the number of points that are in the view if you need to. You can also reduce the number of points in the view if it's going to help you with performance, because not everybody has, a great laptop or a great workstation to work on. But trust me, if you're going to be working with point clouds or files that big, you should have something a little bit more robust that will only
definitely
help you. And that has nothing to do with Bricsys. That's just point clouds in general. But Bricsys will basically perform better than its competitors. And the other thing that I like to tell people is, if you have any doubts, well, two things. We have a couple of videos from our most recent release of V22, which came out in October, that are specifically about point clouds and the tools we have. So I would encourage people to look them up on YouTube. That's one way to see some practical uses of the tools. The other thing is, download the product, download Bricsys for a trial, and just try it out yourself. It's seeing is believing, right?
Yep. Yeah, and I always, when I tell people to do that, I always tell them to do it side by side. Take that other product that we're not naming and take the same data set and run it through both and see just how much better Bricsys handles that stuff. I'm always impressed by that.
And on that note, if I may add, when I first started working at Bricsys, one of the things I kept hearing over and over when I was talking to people who started trying Bricsys for the first time was, first of all, can I open my AutoCAD files? Well, they're DWGs, so the answer automatically is yes. And oddly enough, we've had several people come to us with files that they couldn't open in AutoCAD. Either they got corrupted, they were very large, number of reasons why it was troublesome for AutoCAD, and we could open them up in Bricsys. So just another kind of feather in our cap that a lot of times we can open files that even AutoCAD can't.
Yeah, I've seen that happen too. All right, so as always, folks, as my listeners here know, right, whenever we have a guest on who's going to be our kind of subject matter expert for the day, I always like to end the show by giving them the opportunity to answer some question that I was just too stupid to know I should have asked them. So John, what else do you want our listeners to know about point clouds and Bricsys that I missed asking you today?
Well, I kind of touched on two things. I kind of touched on the whole, commoditization of point clouds, right? I mean, if you have an iPhone Pro 12 or 13 or an iPad Pro, it has a LiDAR scanner in it. There are apps available. You could go out right now and probably scan a little piece of your home or your apartment and then save it out. And if you have Bricsys, you could bring that point cloud in. You'd have to save it in one of the file formats, but the programs I've used on an iPad all have file formats that Bricsys will accept. It accepts the most widely used formats. The other thing is that, Bricsys and is a product developed by Bricsys, which is a company by Hexagon PPM, which is the former Intergraph, by the way. I told you there'd be a tie into Intergraph. And Hexagon PPM also is the parent for Leica Geosystems. So Leica Geosystems is one of the world leaders in surveying and 3D laser scanning equipment, and they are a sister company. And so we have the ability, and we do work with them to make sure that, we're creating a product that, can take the different file formats and process them and offer tools for people to use to manipulate them and model off of them. So we have great resources within our larger organization that we leverage to make a better product. And again, our file format is DWG. I think a lot of people get concerned over what they've been using in the past, and it's not an import, it's not a conversion. We open it natively, we write it natively, so there's no worry about the file format, other than the fact that we just handle it better.
There you go. That works perfectly. Good summary. All right, folks, I think we're going to wrap it up here for today. But first, I want to thank John Ade from Bricsys for being here and helping explain, important tech topics that are kind of beyond my limited mental capacity. So, John, really appreciate you being here, man, and I really do hope you'll consider coming back on the show again in the future.
I'd love to, and thank you.
Oh, look at that. See, Rocco? I didn't scare anybody off. You said I would.
No.
I can't scare you off. If I can't scare you off, I don't think I can scare off anybody. All righty, folks, we're going to get out of here, and we will catch you next time on the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, everybody, today's Cattle Call was brought to you courtesy of Zentech Consultants. That's Rocco and I. Zentech Consultants works with design and manufacturing firms to help our clients purchase and implement the software that they need in these complex industries. We provide a single point of contact for clients to buy, develop, and learn the most vital software systems for your specific needs. Zentech strives to be your trusted technology partner from your initial needs all the way through long-term support and training for your entire staff. So Rocco, why don't you tell them how to reach out to Zentech?
All right, yeah, you can reach out to us through zentechconsultants.net. You can email us at sales@zentechconsultants.net, or you can even call us 866-824-4459.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing from you all.